Good afternoon and welcome to the final concurrent session of the day, engaging in real-world economic development with coffee farmers in Honduras. Our presenter today is Dr. Matthew Osborn, faculty member at Culver Stockton College. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom room screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. On that note, I will hand it over to our presenter.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for, I guess maybe the best comes last, I don't know. It was definitely what worked out in my schedule, and I'm glad to be here today. So what I'd like to share with you is my screen, and I did not share the correct screen with you, so let me try that again. Okay, so I hope you can see the screen. I'm glad to be with you today. What I'd like to cover today is engaging in real-world economic development with coffee farmers in Honduras. And so I'd like to kind of tell you the story of how we got started here. It was June and July a couple of years ago, right after COVID was coming to an end, or coming towards an end in the summer of 2021. But I really wanted to try to find a way to get my students involved in real world problem solving. We've been, subjected to Zoom and subjected to just in classroom stuff, and we weren't able to travel a lot. And so I did some research in the summer, and I found an organization called Global Brigades. And in Global Brigades, the opportunity there was to be able to partner with them, and they have 5 locations all over the world where they're involved in really trying to help marginalized developing countries work their way out of poverty. They have a medical side, they have an environmental part, and they have a business part. And if you go to globalbrigades.org, you can learn a tremendous amount about them. And I'll point some things out to you about that. And so what Global Brigades did is they partnered us with a consortium, a coffee consortium called Secruxo in Honduras, El Paraiso, Honduras. And we began to work with them to discover what some of their business challenges were. And we had to do this still through Zoom, so we called it Telebrigades. And I had approximately 14 students engaged in this process. And I'm going to tell you the story of what took place during that. Okay, so I'd like to kind of introduce you to the Global Brigades team. And here you can see that it did take a team. There was an economic development specialist that worked for Global Brigades, Lorena Zepeda, and she was our feet on the ground. Diana Salinas was the general manager of Secruxo, the company that they put us in touch with. Dr. Sandra Gomez Ventura was the director of teleprograms for Global Brigades, and they brought in a subject matter expert whose name is Ruben Alvarado, and Ruben was phenomenal. He taught our students so much about the coffee production business and helped us see some of the challenges that were going on in the Honduras environment. And so I'd like you to use the question and answer portion of Zoom right now, and let's work together. Let's do a little bit of involvement. I don't know how many people are on this session, so I hope some people will jump in. But I want to learn about what you know about coffee, because I want to tell you something. I didn't know anything about coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker. I know it's a bean. I know you roast it and you grind it and you want it, but I've never been a coffee drinker, so I had a lot to learn myself. And so I'd like to ask you first, where does coffee grow? Does anybody have any ideas where coffee grows? And I'll take a look at the Q&A to see if I get any responses. Good, El Salvador, that's right, they're a huge exporter. Obviously Honduras, because we were working in Honduras. But yeah, Sumatra, good. Africa, Hawaii, excellent. So all of those are exactly correct. And you can see by this map that it looks like it's very centralized around the equator. And so it takes a warm, humid, arid climate to grow coffee. And you can imagine that there's a lot of challenges with, wow, my video is freaking out. There's a lot of challenges with climate change associated to this. So our next question is, how does coffee grow? Do you have any idea what it looks like? So I didn't. I mean, I knew it was a plant, and I knew that it was something that was produced. But I really, that's exactly right. It's bushes, and coffee grows on a bush, and they work really hard throughout the year to keep those bushes pruned so that the bushes produce at their maximum level. And it's really curious to see that overall process. So the next question is, where does the coffee bean come from? Thank you, Anna. Does it smell great in Hawaii? I bet it does. I really bet it does. I love the smell of coffee. I used to live in Jacksonville, Florida, and they had a Maxwell plant where they produced Maxwell coffee. And boy, you get down to the downtown area and you drive by there and the smell is just intoxicating. It's really wonderful. So the coffee bean comes from the coffee cherry. And I had no idea that coffee grew as a cherry. Many of my students had no idea either. So what do you imagine is the process of growing coffee? Well, coffee is a cultivation process. It's just like any other commodity, plant commodity. You have to plant the bushes. You have to obviously fertilize them appropriately. You have to make sure that you get enough water. You have to prune them. And then at a certain part of the year, you pick the cherries, and then the entire process for creating coffee beans is quite amazing. One of the things that I want to mention here is that Secruxo, the coffee consortium, was really focused on, that's exactly right. So it was really focused on trying to create organic farming. And so they had started to work with farmers in the Honduran hill country to get them to move away from poor fertilizers and pesticides and move towards sustainable farming processes. And it takes between 3 and 5 years to become an organic coffee farmer. And just like Anna mentioned, who seems to know a tremendous amount about coffee, it takes 7 or more years for the bush to grow and be able to bloom. And we're going to talk about those blooms as well. So a little bit of introduction to coffee. And so my big question to you is if you can think about the process of coffee growing, when do you think a coffee farmer gets paid? What might be your thoughts on that? When do you think a coffee farmer gets paid? Well, a coffee farmer only gets paid after harvest, and that's exactly right. And so their income income stream only happens about once a year. It's not unlike farmers of corn or wheat or other grains. You work all year long to get your crop, you harvest your crop, and then you sell it as a commodity. Well, coffee farmers, small coffee farmers in this rural area of Honduras aren't sophisticated plantations. They have probably an acre or maybe an acre or two at most. And so, they have a lot of financial challenges to being able to process coffee. So moving away from questions, what I'm going to talk about now is how my class got involved in understanding the magic of coffee. Coffee grows within this cherry. Here's kind of a diagram showing you what a coffee plant or cherry looks like. And the seed or the bean is all they're really looking to harvest. And so everything associated to that cherry is usually thrown away. And we learned that from the subject matter expert who taught us about coffee. And we also learned about the very detailed, sophisticated process of processing coffee along the way. So obviously, when you have cherries, they could go directly into a receiving tank and and have floaters and clean them and all these things. And I'm not going to spend your time on this. Or you can imagine that they have large areas where they spread out these beans, and after they shuck the beans from the cherries, they spread out these beans to be dried and to be worked with so that they dry out appropriately and they don't get moldy, etc. So we did a deep dive on understanding the overall coffee process that happens along the way. We also gained an appreciation to how the farmer's technology it has a lot of constraints. And if you think about coffee, it's very interesting compared to grapes. So out of grapes, we get wine. But the interesting thing there is we use the grape, the cherry part of the grape, and we get rid of the seeds. The opposite is true for coffee. We're using the cherry, getting rid of the cherry, and getting to the bean that becomes roasted. The wine creating process is incredibly engineered and scientific. And sometimes the coffee process is a lot more rudimentary for these farmers. And I'm sure large plantations are much more sophisticated, but in the hills of a developing country, there's a big vacuum in regards to the technology that the farmers have. So our process in working with these people in Honduras is we began to interview the members of Secruxo. And Secruxo is a coffee production consortium. They're also connected to a community bank in that region. So when Global Brigades goes into an area, one of the first things they usually do is create a community bank. The community bank is where members can join, deposit monies, get loans, and then they form these consortiums that begin to pull the community together to work and solve problems. And so as we interviewed these folks, we found that in the months of March, April, and May was where they had to borrow money from Secruxo in order to get the supplies necessary to begin to organically process their crops and to get them ready for the pre-harvest. And in the pre-harvest stages, you have the blooming, you have this pruning of the bushes, you have a blooming of the coffee flowers that come on the bushes, and the blooms stay for 3 or 4 days, and the wind comes along and blows them off. And then about halfway through the year, the farmers are so desperate that when the loan sharks come along, they sell their harvest, they pre-sell their harvest to the loan sharks for about half of the value, or I'm sorry, they pre-sell more than half of their harvest to the loan sharks, and it's usually they get about 70 to 80 cents per dollar of what they would expect to get. And then the beans are harvested, and of course they've got to, when the beans are harvested, they have to give 70 to 80% of their crop to the loan sharks to pay for the loans that were taken from them, and the rest of the harvest gets shared with the consortium and the community bank. And so when my students saw this, they immediately understood that there were some serious problems going on in the process. First of all, the current cycle of coffee bean revenue is stuck. It's stagnant, and it's feeding a poverty cycle, and it has to be transformed. Second of all, there was a lack of cash flow throughout the year to meet the farmers' obligations, which led them to pre-selling their harvest to the loan sharks, and Secruxo was only collecting about 20% of the coffee harvest. Third, most of the coffee plant, the flowers, the leaves, and the pulp are thrown away. And the only thing that they really care about is the bean. And organic certification becomes a critical part of being able to grow their coffee. And the fourth problem that we heard from them was that there was a lack of transportation to reach the farmers for both supply and delivery of the product. And so the keys to success that we came up with was to try to find a way, and we learned this from the subject matter expert, to try to find a way to use the whole coffee plant. If we could use the entire coffee plant and be able to look at the flower, the leaf, the cherry, and the bean, there would be more products to sell that would create more frequent revenue, higher income to the farmers. And it's interesting because the farmers actually said to us, our children aren't staying in Honduras because of the lack of money And because of climate change challenges, they are leaving Honduras and they're walking to Mexico, and they're coming across the southern border of your country. They're just looking for new opportunities. So that feeds some of the challenges that we have. I'm very, very in favor to have a lot of immigrants in this country. We need them for work. I just really wish we could find a way to do it legally and to welcome them and support them properly. So lots of big problems when you start thinking about the immigration challenges. So with higher income, we believe they could fund growth and meet their transportation needs, and also continue to focus on the organic the organic certification part of the process. This picture that you see right there is the management team of Secruxo, and the lady sitting there in the middle is Deanna. And Deanna is a very savvy manager. In fact, with Global Brigades, a lot of the people that become key leaders for them are women, because they are the ones oftentimes available to be able to fill the needs, to where men or husbands are out already working. And so women are lifted up in this process. And I think it's a really powerful opportunity for them. Okay, so what we did was we produced documentation. We produced a timeline and problem statements. We collected information on the revenue and the associated issues with producing coffee. We proposed changes in the generating revenue from several different areas, and we gave them overall financial benefit results. And so we met with the Secruxo team. Our class developed these solutions and got the detail to these. And you could not believe how the students were engaged and how seriously they took this work, because it was real world work. They were working with real people who had real problems, and they felt like they could at least make suggestions for help. Now, in an ideal world, Global Brigades hosts teams of people that travel to these locations, and we could only do this through telebrigades. But I want to pause right here with this map on the screen, and you can see the Honduras area. And I have another class this semester that is working with entrepreneurs in Panama. And my hope is next year, since things are opening up quite a bit and travel is becoming much safer, I'm really hoping that next spring I can have a 12-week class that studies and helps groups of people in Panama. And then during our 3-week term, we have one class, and I would take a group of 15 to 20 students to Panama to meet the same people that we were working with, and to dig deeper and help them as much as we can. So this is a progressive relationship with Global Brigades, and they're really a phenomenal organization. They have so much need, and don't let me forget to tell you the cost associated to doing this telebrigades. It's not overly expensive, but there is a cost involved. Okay, so our solutions. Now, I am at about 2:20 and I'm moving pretty rapidly here. So I'm going to pause for, if you guys have questions, ask questions along the way. And but part of our solution was that the flower that is falling off of the coffee plant is falling to the ground and basically being raked up and thrown away. And so one of the solutions is to purchase a certain type of plastic, and when the flowers bloom, to put that clean plastic on the ground, and when the flowers fall off onto the plastic, to collect the flowers. When the flowers are collected, they can be cleaned and dried, and then they can make coffee flower tea. And there's a real market for this, and there's real revenue to be generated. So you can see here, the producer gets approximately $50 per pound of flowers. They don't have to be the ones to dry it. And so the only two things they really need are the plastic to put down to capture the flowers, and they need safe containers or bags and a labeling system to ship it. And there obviously has to be organic certification, because if they're spraying pesticides, those flowers are useless to the farmers. So the power here is the use of coffee flowers for coffee flower tea, and it's a source of revenue. Okay, so we've got, let me see here. Thank you for encouraging them to put in questions. That's great. I appreciate you guys supporting me here. Okay, so the second piece of revenue that they can generate is coffee leaves. So you can see here that about 2 or 3, maybe even 4 times a year, they prune these bushes. And when they prune the bushes, typically what they do is they collect all these leaves and they put them in piles and they burn them. Well, with organic farms, what they could do is they could take these leaves, and you see in this center picture over here, they lay all these out on plastic. They separate the leaves from the stems. They still get rid of the stems, but there's even a possibility for those stems to be used there that's being considered as well. They take these leaves, they put them in these containers, and then they ship these containers off for the leaves to be processed and dried and ground up. And guess what you can get? You can get drinks out of coffee leaves. And so you get this powder that they can be used to create different types of drink. And so 200 to 500 pounds of leaves per acre, and immediate payment of either 50 to 60 cents per pound. So that's a revenue stream. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's not a lot of effort either. And any kind of revenue will help these people. If they wait for processing for 45 days, they would get $5 per pound. So whatever the processed powder would be $5 per pound. So if they don't mind waiting 45 days, so they could either get paid immediately or they can wait a little longer and get some additional income from that. So we had flowers, we had leaves, and the final thing is these cherries. So when they get the cherry, you see the center picture here, they use a machine to strip the cherry off of the bean, and they end up taking all this coffee pulp and throwing it away. In fact, they were throwing it in their waterways, and it became an environmental problem. And what we learned from the subject matter expert was you could take the pulp from the cherry, you could get these safe containers, these blue containers, and you could put the pulp in there. Now, the timing of this is important. It can't sit in there too long or it will begin to ferment and rot. And so there's a timing of delivery of these blue barrels to a plant so that they can be processed. But processed coffee cherries turns into coffee fruit syrup. And the coffee fruit syrup, or those cherries, could be dried and ground up into what's called cascara. And cascara can be used to make many type of pastries, just like any other kind of flour can. And so all the nutrients associated to the cherry of the plant is really important to the overall process. Okay, so there's a question here, and it says, Dr. Osborn, I have a question. Does the partnership with your students merely supplement the program, or does it fully power the business decisions and initiatives? So if you're talking about merely supplementing Global Brigades, it is not the fully does not fully power the Global Brigades program. The involvement, the partnership is each student was charged $300 to participate, and I was able to pay. I had 15 students, and I was able to pay the $4,500 through a grant that I had received to be able to manage the application of those funds. And so I was able to, we were able to pay Global Brigades about $4,500 for the experience, and that helps fund the subject matter experts and those things. What our involvement, our partnership does is try to give them real world solutions. You know, I don't know that it's realistic to think that we're going to solve their problems, and I think there's a lot of sociology and psychology that goes into that. And but man, you're right. The students felt so empowered, and the grant was amazing. I have the privilege of being what's called the Mormon professor, MOORMAN. And as the Mormon professor, I had grant money available to me, and I do all kinds of programs on campus, but I really wanted to involve my students somehow in helping people in a developing country. Thanks for your comment about the cascara. So that's tremendous. I think that Victoria said, I tried a cascara drink at a cafe a few weeks ago. So I don't know if you liked it or not, but yes, absolutely. That the cascara drinks are becoming more and more popular. And it's kind of like an alternative to coffee, because you're getting nutrients from the cherry itself. And I just think that's really powerful to think of. Okay, now we've helped these organic farmers come up with 3 additional revenue streams. So let's take a look. So you knew before in March, April, and May, they were just basically borrowing money in order to get the supplies they need to go forward. But now that they have the leaves and the flowers, they're not borrowing money, they're selling those items to get the money that they need to get the supplies. And again, in June and July, there's another pruning. In August, there's another pruning process. In September, there are cherries that are beginning to come onto the plants, and they don't have to have loan sharks. So because of the flowers and the leaves, they can say no to the loan sharks and not pre-sale their harvest and get pennies on the dollar, which I think is the real challenge. So now we get them out of this poverty cycle into this transformational revenue cycle. And then, of course, the cherries come to full fruition, and they harvest those cherries in the October-November timeframe. And then they go into the process of stripping off the cherries, selling the cherries, and then processing the beans, and ultimately getting revenue from the beans as well. Let me see back here in the chat area. Let me see. What types of drinks do the powder from the leaves make? It's more of a tea. So I think that the tea we like our brewed tea. So you can grind up those leaves into a powder and put them in like tea bags. And I have not had any of that, but that's all tea is a leaf anyways. And I drink lots of tea, and I don't drink the coffee. So that's mostly what's being processed there. Okay, so I hope I haven't gone too fast. Let's show you a couple more screens here. One of the things that we built for them, and please don't analyze this too closely because we didn't have the detail of the information that we really wanted, but it still taught the students to do a cost benefit analysis, looking at a 5-year turnaround. What would be the costs to buy the plastic, to buy the crates, to be able to collect the pulp into the barrels, to get the labeling system, to use the hand scanners on that labeling system, etc. And so we tried to identify the costs. Most of the costs came in the first year, but I then replicated those into the 3rd year with an increase because, and I say my finance students did this, and because we didn't want to believe that those supplies would last forever. So about every few years, we replicated the supplies in this model. And then we looked at the revenue, and this revenue was based on a 1-acre farm. And so on a 1-acre farm, your total present value benefits were $9,500 and change, and your costs were about $1,707. And so you can see the additional revenue in dollars here. And again, this is not necessarily perfect, but it gave them a good idea that there was juice in the squeeze, or I should say, stuff coming from the cherries for the coffee plant. So just to let you know, 1 year after we did this project, as we were working with Sacruxo, their revenue that year was $250,000. 1 year later, they nearly tripled the revenue to $750,000. Sacruxo was able to take out a $350,000 loan to address immediate urgent needs like transportation and to get rid of the loan sharks. And then the last thing is our students' involvement was crucial, they said, to advancing and helping design a clear pathway to success, which is evident in the pictures. So what you see in the pictures are more organic coffee plants, people modifying their fields in the top right-hand corner to become organic. They're building a processing center to where they can process the leaves and the flowers and the cherries. And so they're empowering themselves to do more and more. And there's your Sacruxo team. And these people travel out to the farmers and educate the farmers on the organic process. It's really an amazing thing to see this community change. Here's the processing plant that they're currently building right now. And it says by doing so, they were able to participate in what's called a Comrule, which is a government program where different community banks have access to working capital. So they were able to get a grant, and they were able to get a larger loan about $1.6 million to build a plant. And another quote, the clarity your team provided has been crucial to attain and achieve all these goals with Global Brigades' help and boots on the ground. And so when I actually contacted all my students from the class that we were in and shared this presentation with them and shared the impact that was going on. Let me check on our chat for just a second. I'm at 229. I think I'm doing pretty good here. It's somewhat like matcha. That would probably be something you would know. I need to research that a little bit more. Thank you for your photos, no problem. Amazing. Do you know what coffee brands we could buy to specifically support Cruxo? To my knowledge, they are a supplier of the commodity. I don't know exactly what brands, but that's another question that I can research and add to this story. But thank you for asking that question. That's really kind of you. And the updates, social media updates to follow wonderful progress, that would be really great too. So I will check with Global Brigades on that. All this information I have on the 1 year later came directly from Global Brigades, but I don't know that GB does a great job at updating the public on the different projects they have on their website. So I think that would be a good suggestion to them as well. Let me look at the Q&A. So is cascara used for a food supplement or anything else in drinks? I would say that cascara is used as making, yes, to be able to make drinks and as a food supplement. And there is a whole bio portion of this. So the subject matter expert we had gave us deck upon deck of PowerPoint slides of the health benefits related to the biology of the plant, and the students learned some about that. I also wanted to share with you that we are working with 4 entrepreneurs in Panama this semester. We have our final presentation to them next week. This was a lot different. You know, when we were working with Honduras and Cruxo, we were working with one group of people, and it was very easy to communicate. The internet was very sound, and everything worked good. With these 4 entrepreneurs in different rural communities in Panama, sometimes we're having a lot of challenges with internet connectivity. We have to use WhatsApp and be able to communicate only verbally with them, and it gets be a little bit frustrating. There is an artist that we're working with, and my team actually saw a marketing opportunity and designed these business cards in both English and Spanish for this artist named Umber. And Umber Gonzalez is a really great guy. You can see there, those are real QR codes that the team created. He actually makes things out of wasted plastic that he collects on the beaches. He restores photos. And so I'm going to be adding to this story of my partnership with Global Brigades this year with the work that we're doing in Panama. And as I mentioned to you, it's my goal to be able to take my team, a team of people, to Panama next year. So that's the end of my presentation. And I'd just like to give a shout out of thanks again to the Global Brigades partnership. Lorena was phenomenal. She provided curriculum. She created all the calls and made my life easy. I will be honest with you and say 3 to 4 weeks in the beginning of the process, it was pretty frustrating trying to figure out what we were going to do for these guys. But once we met with Ruben and he educated us, it's kind of like the lights came on for my students, and they said, we should be doing something with the flower. We should use the leaves. We should use the cherries. And he helped us see that. But the small farmers in Honduras, they didn't know that. And so there was a disconnect. And so we felt like we were able to empower them with new information. Deanna Salinas was phenomenal. The general manager of Cruxo, all these people just made the process all that possible. So as Victoria says, if you have any other questions, please throw them in the Q&A box. And my presentation is wrapped up. I hope it was useful for you. I really think that innovative engagement in rural communities and just research Global Brigades and go out there and see what they're doing. If you have a medical team, if you have a dental team, if you're working on climate change or producing clean water and sanitation, They work with the United Nations on trying to take developing countries and bring them out of poverty and give these people an opportunity. I can't think of a better way to help our society. So Christine says, what ways can we support this mission, either prior to your trip or doing your trip? Well, yeah, you could write a big check, but you don't need to, because I've got grant money to really almost pay the way. So our students collect travel funds while they're here. So every semester that they're, or every year that they're here, they collect $500 out of their tuition and set it aside for travel. And so they get that money towards the end of their senior year. I have the grant money to help them. And so it will take students who usually wouldn't travel because it's economically not possible. This is very possible because of the grant money that I have. But thank you so much for asking that. My suggestion to you, if you really want to support something, is to go to Global Brigades. They need donations all the time, and they've collected millions and millions of dollars over time to try to help these 5 different areas in the world that they're working on. Thank you, Anna, for your kind comments. Is there any use for coffee husks or woods? Now, that was something I mentioned earlier. And our thought process there, and this is about 8 months later, 9 months later, is, you know how people like to barbecue and they use like cherry or other pieces of wood? What if we could take those branches and find a way to collect them and dry them and cut them up and put them in bags, and then people could buy coffee branches to smoke their meat? How cool would that be? You know, so that's a different area that we've sent down through Global Brigades back to Sacruxo. Don't throw all these branches away. Collect them, dry them out, chop them up, put them in bags, find a way to get them to the United States, where we use things like that to smoke our meats. Christine, thank you very much. I appreciate your kind comments. I'm glad you love coffee, and I hope that you get a chance to try the coffee flower tea. That's really phenomenal. So I've really enjoyed doing this. I hope that, again, I hope that it was useful. I'll be glad to try to provide updates. I do provide updates on my story. In fact, this is probably the 5th time I've presented this. I went to a conference on the Society of Experiential Educators, and I presented it there. I'm going back to the Society of Experiential Educators next fall in Orlando, and I'm providing updates on the stuff that we're doing with Panama right now. So I know I'm presenting at that conference, and I'm happy to provide updates along the way. If you shoot me an email, I'll be glad to keep in touch and let you know what's going on. So Victoria, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Is there anything else we need to do?
Thank you so much, Dr. Osborn. We actually have one more question in the chat from my colleague, Lauren. She is wondering if there are internship opportunities or situations for a single student, or does it need to be a small group to be involved? And also, is it academic based with teachers and classes, or are there smaller scale volunteers involved?
Yeah, no, super question. And the answer to the question is, I don't know. So, and professors always need to be willing to say that if they don't know. So the best thing to do is I have a contact at Global Brigades. Her name is Lauren Maitland. And Lauren Maitland, I can give you her email and phone number. She is kind of like the United States key person to coordinating all this with colleges and universities. And by the way, they do this with colleges and universities all over the world. And they usually do small groups, and they travel to these locations, and they're on site for between 7 and 9 days. I really love our setup where we can do the 12-week in-class tele-brigade type of thing, and then maybe take a trip down there during the 3-week in order to enhance that. So I would believe heavily that there are needs for interns, especially if they were bilingual. It would really help. So interns is a big deal, and then I think small groups. But if you reach out to me through email, I'll get you Lauren Maitland's information and be glad to connect the two of you and let you go from there. Thank you, Lauren, for answering that question or asking that question.
Thank you, Dr. Osborn. I do not see any other questions in the chat or in the Q&A box at this time. So I just want to say on behalf of all of our attendees and myself, thank you so much. This was really wonderful to learn about your mission and all that you're doing along with your students. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Well, it was my pleasure. I thank you for this conference. I love it being virtual because we don't have to take all that time to travel. And although I'd love to come to the Charleston area, I've been there 100 times on business in my past life. I love where you guys work because they have the best restaurants in the country, I think. But anyways, so if you guys ever do this in person, I'm on an airplane. But thank you for including me, and I look forward to working with Hawks as we go forward.
Thank you, Dr. Osborn. Us too. And everyone, this is the final concurrent session of the day and of our conference. We're sad to see it end, but on behalf of everyone here at Hawks Learning, thank you to our presenters and to our attendees for being a part of IES 2023. And just to remind you, recordings of this year's sessions will be provided in the coming days. And if you haven't already, don't forget to swing by our exhibit hall to say hello to my colleagues on the Hawks team. While you're there, you can view a quick 5-minute demonstration, request your conference t-shirt, and be entered to win a $50 hourly giveaway. And in the spirit of St. Patrick's Day, you will find a few golden coins throughout the conference website. Keep your eyes peeled for those and click on them to be entered to win an additional raffle. Our booth will remain open until 5 p.m. Eastern. And thank you again for joining us for IES 2023.